Well, I wanted to follow up on the most recent Senate votes for anyone who's interested. For that, I would urge you to read some of the essays by Arthur Silber, and I'm going to be quoting him quite extensively here in this video. His blog is called Power of Narrative, and he has a long-term perspective on things. He's not a partisan. I think he's just a human who sees a larger picture. So anyway, I don't, I'm not trying to trump his blog or anything. Everybody has to make up their own mind. But for right now, what I want to do is read some excerpts from his most recent essay, and I will post a link to his blog later on this video. So Arthur Silber writes, because an empire must, by definition, rely on coercion and murder, any given day in the rule of empire is immoral and detestable for those who genuinely value liberty and peace. But certain days are worse than others in terms of what it bodes for our future and for the future of the world. Yesterday was a particularly awful day in the United States Senate, now controlled and led by the Democrats. If there were any people out there still believing that the Democrats represent a fundamental shift in US foreign policy, they have no reason to believe it any longer. Even before yesterday's events, maintenance of such belief required criminal ignorance and/or a willingness to peddle lies and propaganda on a large scale. The logical and necessary implications of the Senate's action mean that we will at least see several more decades of war, large-scale death, chaos, and destruction. It would appear that with regard to its broad outlines, the 21st century will be the 20th century all over again. Endless war, tens of millions of deaths, brutality that spreads across the entire globe, and darkness that descends upon most of us. Thus, we have Hillary Clinton saying it is the Iraqis' fault that they didn't avail themselves of the wonderful opportunity we provided them. The same line is peddled by many other Democrats and, of course, Republicans as well. To describe this perspective as monstrously and brutally immoral and humane does not even begin to describe its hideousness. The West has pursued this general pattern in Southeast Asia, in most of Africa, and of course in the Middle East. As some of my earlier posts discussed, and this is Arthur Silber talking, an especially primitive and unforgivable racism is a necessary part of the dynamic involved, and this racism is an inextricable part of the American national myth. Of course, we will not leave Iraq, nor will we leave the Middle East. The horrific chaos and violence our actions have set in motion will now serve as the excuse for us to maintain a significant presence in the Middle East for decades to come, which was the goal all along. And yesterday, our map makers in the US Senate, led by the notable Joe Biden, lent their approval to redrawing the lines again. The Senate approved a resolution by Senator Joseph Biden, Democrat of Delaware, and chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, calling for greater diplomatic efforts and in particular a focus on partitioning Iraq into federal regions in hopes of reaching a political solution and more swiftly ending the war. Mr. Biden's resolution called on the United States to actively support a political settlement in Iraq based on the final provisions of the Constitution of Iraq that create a federal system of government and allow for the creation of federal regions consistent with the wishes of the Iraqi people and their elected leaders. And it is said that the U.S. should call on international community to help Iraqi's neighbors not to intervene or to stabilize Iraq. The limitless arrogance of these vile politicians is breathtaking. In the context of the U.S. invasion and occupation, the meaningless nod to the wishes of the Iraqi people and their elected leaders. And this is most insulting. It's actually worse than insulting. And to demand that Iraqi's neighbors not intervene in order to destabilize Iraq, after all that we have done and continue to do, is sickening to an extent that makes accurate description all but impossible. You can now add your Democratic-led Senate to the murderers' row that includes Bush, the Republicans, and other killers. So still another time, I note that murder, chaos, devastation, and human suffering on an ungraspable scale are what the U.S. governing class wants. Is that what you want? For many Americans, the answer seems to be yes, it is. So Arthur's advice, and it probably will be mine as well pretty soon, is for any Democrats who read this and who oppose the Democratic Party's program of perpetual war, corporatism, and authoritarianism, here's what you can do. Quit the party.